It's on to the finals in the historic Boston election cycle, and our guest this morning is Michael Flaherty. He was the top vote getter in the preliminary election for city council, a citywide powerhouse on his own. What does he see in the final pairing for mayor? Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Welcome to OTR, everyone. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter Janet Wu. It's great to have you with us this morning. One eventful race down, another one right on the horizon. And our guest this morning is Boston City Councilor Michael Flaherty, an at-large member of the council and a candidate for re-election. And as we said, the top vote getter in the preliminary for city council. A native of South Boston, first elected in 1999. He unsuccessfully ran for mayor in 2009. Losing to Tom Menino. He holds degrees from BC and Boston University. So it's thanks for being here. Every time I say Michael, I can think of, I'm your mother and I'm scolding you. Michael.
Great to be here.
It's great to see you.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming.
Of course, I'm so old. When I hear Michael Flaherty, I think of your dad.
Yeah, right.
Since I covered him when he was a state rep.
You did.
So you know all of the candidates, obviously.
I
you
do
serve
work with
with
all
them,
of them. Yeah.
right? And you served with them on the city council. You endorsed no one
Correct.
in the preliminary. It was no surprise that Michelle Wu came in well ahead of the rest of the candidates. Why did Annissa Essaibi-George grab the second spot, in your opinion?
Sure, because she's a citywide city council. I've said that, and you're seeing a lot of folks and pundits. Two things happened in this race that I think are being missed. Is one that both Annissa and Michelle have been on the ballot citywide since 2013. That counts for something, right? And they've also been doing constituent service work across the city during their time on the council. That, plus the fact that we were in a pandemic, and so everything was canceled. The parades, the block parties, the house parties, the Little League openings, the groundbreakings, the ribbon cuttings. Those are events that obviously are opportunities, particularly for district councilors or those not holding office, to be able to get out there and to meet voters. I think that they were at a huge disadvantage, largely driven by the pandemic, while obviously Michelle and Annissa had already built citywide name recognition and citywide field organization. And I saw that on election day. I called the results at like 8:25. I went across the city. I saw who was supporting who. I saw who had bodies and where they were lined up, as well as when the turnout was coming in. I said, this is going to favor, two at-large incumbents. And so I'm not sure what any of the other candidates could have done, because, again, being in the pandemic and not having those opportunities, those missed opportunities, critical in neighborhoods across the city, and that allowed, obviously, incumbents, or at least in this instance, citywide councils.
But one of those other candidates was the acting mayor, was actually sitting in the corner office.
True, and I think they made also a huge mistake. Obviously, Tom Menino was the last person to become be acting mayor and then move on to hold the spot. People forget that he came from Ward 18, which is voter-rich, Hyde Park, Reedville, and Roslindale. He spent 10 years on the council as chair of Ways and Means, and he spent 16 years zigzagging the city with Joe Timothy running for mayor against former Mayor Kevin White. So once he became the acting mayor, he knew exactly who to call and where to go to. Very politically astute. This instance here, Kim, unfortunately, had only been a city councilor for a term and a half. From a much smaller voting base, and really kind of needed to get out there. And again, having the pandemic and people still being fearful. Then, sort of in the middle of this, as we started to get back out there, the Delta variant lands, and then everyone sort of starts to go and retreat and go back inside again. So, sort of a tough thing to do. And Andrea Campbell and obviously John Barros added tremendous value, as did Representative Santiago. Early on, he had eventually dropped out, but they added tremendous value. I think that folks in Washington should learn, quite frankly, from this race. This was a race about issues that were important. There was some sort of snipping back and forth, which is somewhat expected in a contested race, but it was focused primarily and mainly on the issues and not on personalities.
Well, let's look forward to the final leg of the race. Essaibi-George is considered to be more of a moderate. Wu is considered to be more of a progressive. Will the race come down, as you say, down to issues specifically, or is it going to come down to how many campaigns come down to personality and, in this case, race, as in, race?
I think this issue here obviously will be an opportunity for voters and also the media to do a deep dive on the candidates, their policies, their issues, and whether or not they're practical to implement. I think that our issues, obviously we know them, is to improve the quality of our schools and to have a curriculum in Boston Public Schools that matches Boston's economy. We have to solve the housing crisis. We're becoming the city of the rich and the poor, Manhattanizing ourselves, and also massing caste. And so I think that that's really going to be a big focus. This is going to really be the big focus.
Is there going to be? Are we going to be able to see major differences on how the two candidates will deal with all these three issues?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. And it's not going to be sort of a moderate versus progressive. It's going to be who has the ideas and the ability to create policy to address these issues. Obviously, on the education side, Anissa, as a former teacher, and also her work on substance abuse and mental health and homelessness, clearly she'll have tremendous experience there. And on the other side, on the housing side and on the transportation side, Michelle has led on those efforts. So I think that you're going to they're going to probably want to naturally break to where their strengths are and their comfort zone is. I think the public, the voters, and the press need to bring them to where they may not be as comfortable, but they've got some explaining to do because people want to know where they are on those issues.
So let's talk about numbers. You talk about voters. There are roughly in Boston, roughly 400,000 registered voters.
Registered.
And 107 voted in the preliminary.
Correct.
So it's fair to say interest rather lagged all summer, and the number of voters reflected that because it was a lower number turnout. 5,000 fewer people filling out ballots than the last open mayoral race 8 years ago, and there was the option of mail-in and early voting, so there were more options this time around. So why is interest in the race lagged?
Sure. I think people are turned off by politics, and that may be what we're seeing and what plays itself out in Washington. And I think it trickles back to the states and to cities and towns. The fact here is that there was 6% less voter turnout in this preliminary than the last sort of hotly contested mayor's race in 2013. I initially had predicted turnout was going to be around 110. It was just a little under that at 107. And that was still 6% less than the last time. Why did that 6% stay home in the preliminary election? Particularly as Boston's population is growing. There's a lot of excitement around our city. We've got the best colleges, universities in the world. We've got the best hospitals, a network of community health centers. CEOs are coming here on a regular basis, moving their companies here. So Boston's got mojo, and a lot of other cities our size or bigger are a little jealous as to what we have going on in the city. That said, we do have our fair share of problems, but we should have had a more excited electorate, and that didn't happen. Now we're moving to the final election. Clearly the community of color, and specifically the black and brown community, the question is what will they do in the final election?
What do you think
coalesce?
they'll do?
I don't know. I think the candidates themselves, if they're not already doing it, I would advise them, they should be burning up those phone lines. Very similar to what Marty Walsh did after the preliminary with John Conley in the lead. Marty skillfully was able to tie up the rest of the field and got their support and then got their supporters' support. So I think the challenge is if there's ever an opportunity to bring Kim Janey and Andrea Campbell together behind a specific candidate, because there was a rift, I think, in the community of color as it pertained to both Kim and Andrea, and if they're able to kind of put that aside and get behind a candidate, whether that's Michelle or Anissa, that clearly would be, that would probably potentially create some momentum for that candidate in the community of color, but it's still going to be, and then you have your communities, but then there's the communities within your communities that spread across the city. So, there are people, and Janet and I, because we're in the same neighborhood, we see the changing faces in the neighborhood, and that plays itself out all across the city. So it's sort of this new Boston versus old Boston. I just ran a citywide election and topped the ticket. You could probably put me in both camps as sort of old Boston, new Boston. It's your work ethic. It's the relationships you build. It's why I do so well across the city, because I do well in the Somali community, the Haitian community, the Caribbean community, the Vietnamese community, the Latino community, the Cape Verdean community, in addition to, those sort of strong traditional wards and precincts.
Let's talk about, you bring up the former mayor. He did not endorse in this race. His new boss reportedly would not allow it. But his mother was very public in her support for Anissa Essaibi George. Was Walsh's fingerprints all over her victory in this low turnout election? Do you think his army, his field operation, his people really helped her?
When I went across the city, I saw parts of his organization kind of a little bit with most of the candidates. Do I think that his Dorchester base was sort of strongly behind Anissa as a Dorchester girl? Yes. I think John Barrows technically got a little bit of that too because he had served in the administration. But I saw a lot of city employees obviously working out there on behalf of the acting mayor as well. And
so you don't think
Michelle,
he had much of an influence on
outside
this?
of Dorchester? I think folks, were supporting the candidate that they either knew or felt was best prepared to serve the city. But I think that there was clearly strong Dorchester efforts. But Anissa is from Dorchester. She's a Dorchester girl, and so it would be natural for folks in Dorchester to support her. But I did see, just to the most part, I saw a lot of key sort of Walsh administration folks. They were, a lot of them early on were heavy behind Barrows, having served in the executive office with him.